Hello, my name is Jessica Oster. Today I'm going to be reporting on some of the current research regarding LGBTQIA characters and experiences in picture books for elementary age students. If this is a really important topic to me, I just want to start with a little introduction about who I am and why this is important. I am currently a teacher. I work in a multi-aged Montessori classroom, and I have always really found that students embrace and engage very well with very diverse storylines, and they always are so curious, and it's important to provide them with multiple perspectives and such. Personally, when I was younger, I was raised in a very religious household and went to church very often and was very happy about who I was at the time and what I was engaged with. But then as the teachings got a little stronger and things started to happen a little bit more, I was being taught that being a part of the LGBTQIA was just not acceptable, and it was unacceptable. And I heard the phrase a lot, love the sinner and not the sin, and I just didn't understand that. I thought, well, we are told that the higher beings love everybody, and I don't understand why we can't too, and this is kind of silly to me. And as I reflected more about my own experiences throughout this research project in particular, I started to notice that as I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of experiences with any kind of text in relations to LGBTQIA topics. There were none in classrooms. There were none that I had an easy time finding at libraries. And if I did find them, it was always very secretive, and it was always like something that you had to keep hush hush. And what ended up happening, long story short, was that I discovered pretty early on that I myself was part of the LGBTQIA. I am bisexual, and I did not come to terms with that until very late in life, when I was a young teenager. I would say probably by the time I was like 11, I started to realize that had to have been what was going on. But because of the different environments that I was in where one environment isn't telling me anything about LGBTQIA, like at school it was never talked about, and the other is church, where I'm just being told that it's not acceptable. I started to think, well, I must just be like, this is just me, like nobody else is like this. What do you mean? Like this doesn't exist. So I repressed a lot of it, and up until the time that I got married at 21, I think, I didn't really believe in it. I didn't really understand it. It took me a long time to really come to terms with who I am and be okay with it. And I really feel that if I had been exposed to texts or books or picture books even as a kid that just showed how okay it is to live your life in whatever manner fits best for you, that I probably could have come to terms with it a lot sooner in life. So my goal as a teacher has always been to, not even just in this aspect, but in a lot of ways, provide experiences for my students that I feel that I missed or that my peers missed. And so I just feel it's so important to provide students with diverse texts that allow them to understand different people and experiences that are happening around them, so that they can either find things that relate to them or find ways to support others. So while I was going through the research, I found some key ideas. There were so many that I wanted to include, but we were told to focus on 3, so that's what I focused on, but I am going to touch on one more at the very end of the video, so keep watching. So some of the key ideas in the literature were providing students with LGBTQI experiences through picture books, support students in identifying themselves and supporting their life's experiences. This is so impactful because we have research that shows that just exposing students to these books and these topics can really help them throughout their lives. And there's some really great information I will follow up with on that. There are many struggles related to this topic and this genre of books in general. Some of the main sub-themes that I kind of found within there being struggles were that pre-service teachers are always very eager and excited to introduce these topics, because when they're in university or college, they're being taught, like, try to make it as diverse as possible, do it this, do it that. But then when they get into the classrooms, they start to get concerned over backlash and possibility of losing their job and related to the types of books that they're providing students. And we'll talk more about that soon. Another concept that I thought was really interesting, but made a lot of sense, was that librarians have too much influence over what texts are being included in a school library. And that can go one way or the other. Either there are people that feel that they're providing too much exposure, and then there's a lot of research to show that many are not showing enough at all. And the third main key idea that we're going to focus on today are that many books with LGBTQIA plus themes lack intersectionality and diversity, therefore not providing students with a full diverse experience. And I'm very excited to get into that, because it's something I actually discovered myself when I was going through and creating my text set, was that not only is the research true, I mean, I wasn't questioning it, but then to go in and dive in headfirst and experience it was really mind-blowing. And I will say, in the last few years, there's been more of an upsurgence of trying to fix that, which is really great, and we'll talk about more later. So we're going to start up with the first key idea, was the importance of LGBTQIA literature. Some concerns, or just main ideas within this, were age appropriateness. There was a study in 2011 where there were several classes in a project, and some classes were taught a control lesson that did not have any LGBTQI themes in it at all. It was just a lesson. And then there was other classes that did have those themes embedded within them. Each lesson was geared towards the appropriate age range of the students, and I think it ranged from about kinder to second grade, or first and second grade at least. And when they were doing these lessons, they included a lot of open-ended questions to encourage discussions from the students. One thing that was super enlightening was that they found that as long as the lesson was taught in a developmentally appropriate way, students were shown that they can engage in both LGBTQIA and non-LGBTQIA lessons with no harm to them, emotionally or socially. As long as they are learning it in a way that works best for their brains and how they're growing at that time in their development, they're just learning. They don't see a difference or know really a difference in what's going on. And it actually ended up being found that students were more engaged with LGBTQIA topics and it's likely to be that it was because it was newer to them and it was more interesting. And a lot of times what was found in some research too was that it's more related to who they are or the experiences that they're having in their lives, which again relates to why it's so important to have these topics in your classroom. So some ways that the picture books can be and are used to support students are to provide mirrors for them to see themselves in these books, especially in communities where they may not see this in real life as much. And you can use my example vaguely for this, right? In my experience, my world was, I would go to school, I would go to church, I'd come home. And in my experience, there was not a lot of this. And maybe I would see it in movies, or maybe I would read it in the occasional book. But again, I was very sheltered. And so it wasn't something that I was exposed to very often, besides through friends as I got older. And another example within the research and the literature was talking a lot about small rural communities where it might even be purposely not exposed to students. So allowing them to be exposed to it and to find those mirrors that are going to show them themselves and others that are in their lives can really help support them feel like, oh my gosh, I do belong in this world. Like there's nothing wrong with me. Another thing is that picture books with LGBTQIA topics also help teachers think about how to bring discussions about gender identities and gender expressions into their classrooms. Books really can open doors to so many things, right? You always hear the typical, books open the door to adventures and this and that, but what a lot of times we forget is that there are so many other adventures out there, right? There's kids that are living their lives and they don't know how to talk about or feel about things that they've experienced, and providing picture books that give students mirrors can really help them to be able to work through those things in their mind and be able to discuss them more openly and more clearly with their parents or their teachers. Another thing was that having books with these themes helped teachers become more welcoming and accepting of students. And it was found that when teachers have a higher acceptance level of LGBTQI students, the students feel more accepted and willing to learn and engage in the classroom. Sometimes this feels like a no-brainer, but it really is so validating to know that there's research that has shown this and it can be used to help back up these statements. When, for example, if you were a pre-service teacher and you were trying to incorporate these into your classroom and you have angry parents or angry administrators, this is what the research says. I'm just doing what the research says. And that's a great way to help support you, not only supporting students, but also to say, like, I'm just doing what is best for the students based on the current research that's happening right now. So our next theme that we're gonna touch on is the struggles related to LGBTQI books being in elementary school. The first one we're going to talk about are the librarians. There was a really great quote in an article from 2017 that said, "School librarians function as gatekeepers. The decisions made by these gatekeepers may enable greater access to representative literature or may limit access." I thought that was such a great quote because it really explains the struggle so much, right? The librarians, besides teachers in their own classrooms, but if we're gonna talk specifically about the libraries in a school. The librarians of the school are the ones that curate and create the collection of knowledge that's in the school, whether they're fiction or nonfiction books. And what those librarians choose to include and to exclude is going to really foundationally change what the students are and are not exposed to or learning about. And so in this article, there was a study done, and they surveyed school librarians to see how many librarians actively promote books of diverse topics, ranging from racially diverse books, including racially diverse books and LGBTQIA themes. A staggering 60% of librarians have never promoted books that include transgender characters. And this has had to do a lot with personal beliefs, religious beliefs, anything. And when they were asked to express whether they were comfortable promoting diverse books, the numbers skewed similarly, where the majority of librarians were comfortable promoting heteronormativity, racial diversity, and even mixed families, such as divorce or foster families, but not books that included LGBTQIA themes. And again, these decisions ranged from personal or religious beliefs, or the ideas that elementary students are just not ready to explore these topics, which, as we talked about earlier, we know is not true. As long as it's age appropriately discussed, then they're more than capable and excited to learn about it. The next topic is the pre-service educators, the educators that are fresh out of college, and we love them and we need them so bad, and we want them to be excited, and they are. I mean, even myself as a pre-service educator, I went in thinking, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make a difference, and still found blockers and fear that they instilled, So pre-service educators in the research, results were pretty conflicting, not due to the individuals, but it really had to do with the structures that were in place. There was an article in 2025 that found that incoming educators have more training in diversity and inclusion and are eager to use it, but they're struggling to work around book bans and strict approval processes. There was one educator who spoke up in the survey specifically that had an experience where they had to submit a list of all of the books that they intended to use in their lessons in their classroom to administration of the school that they would be working at. Oh no, I'm sorry, not working, interning. So they were doing their student teaching at. But the school would not provide any qualification materials to explain why a book was or was not accepted for use. And it's pretty clear I'm sure that educator probably could have looked at the list and easily determined what the qualifications were, but to imagine going in as a new educator and you're training, you're getting ready to see what it's like to be a teacher, and to immediately be blocked in such a way can be really harming, because you're so excited and you're motivated and you want to do your best, and you're immediately told, no, you can't do this. And especially if it's something that you're really passionate about, or you've really took a long time to craft, it can be really disheartening and frustrating. And that seemed to be the consensus throughout that article and that survey, was that many of these pre-service teachers were scared for their jobs. They were scared for their livelihoods. They were worried that administration wouldn't be supportive. And there were some that got lucky and got really supportive administration and didn't have as many issues, but again, it's kind of like a 1 in 5 or 1 in so many like ratio, right? Like you have to get lucky to have those families or the administration that will support you, which is very disheartening to say the least. The third key theme within the research was that there was a lack of diversity and intersectionality in children's LGBTQIA books, which, when you think about it, like you're personally, I'm going to be very, very, very transparent right now. When I went into this research, I assumed this was not going to be a topic. And I mean, I didn't even think about it. I was like, there's no way. Why wouldn't they be diverse? And look at me, of course, I would think something like that, which is not okay and I'm working on. But I thought, well, if they're going to include these topics, why would they not also make them racially diverse or have intersectionality within them and include different family structures? But there was quite a bit of research to show that they really lacked one, the other, or both, and that even transgender storylines still portrayed gender stereotypes. For example, a transgender boy may be seen cutting his hair short to look masculine, or all of a sudden gain an affinity for cars and trucks, while a transgender girl may start wearing a lot of pink in dresses, which in reality is not always true. People display gender in many different ways, and they are all valid and acceptable. And for that to be what's portrayed in the children's books is, again, like providing a mirror or almost a structure for what it should or could look like versus just providing, a structure for what it should look like instead of providing a structure of what it could look like. You could look like anything and be this person. So there was a study in 2023 that did an exploration of 100 LGBTQIA+ themed books. And it was found that out of 100 books, only 22 of them truly depicted intersectionality between the character's identity and the experiences of those around them. And that was like so eye-opening. Only 22 of 100, so 22% of books are truly showing diversity. And there seems to be a big push in literature for transgender children in particular to pick a gender instead of the idea that they could be gender fluid or gender nonconforming. Again, just portraying heteronormative stereotypes. So even when we are an educator is trying to provide books of this topic, right, of LGBTQIA themes, we have to be very intentional about what books we're choosing, because we don't want students to think that you have to be a boy or a girl or that you have to choose a side, basically. We want to make sure that they can see that there's many different ways to exist. Which leads into my text set. So my personal text set, and I'll show a picture here on the screen in just a second, but my text set was very almost like fun to put together, but also took a lot of time and intentionality, because having the research now and understanding what to look for, what to avoid, what to make sure to include, really opened my eyes to what there is and how many great, wonderful new LGBTQIA plus like themed books there are, but also a lot of the struggles that were portrayed in the third key idea, like I told you, where there's just not as much diversity. So you as a teacher, you really truly have to be so intentional about what you choose. I decided to choose the ABCs of queer history, I Am a Rainbow, Glenn Burke, Game Changer, the man who invented the high five, Granddad's Pride, Pink, Blue, and You, Questions for Kids About Gender Stereotypes, The Dress in the Window, If You're a Kid Like Gavin, Hooray for She, He, They, and They, Miss Rita, Mystery Reader, my personal favorite in the text set, I Love You Because I Love You. When I was choosing the books in this text set, I wanted to make sure that I included both fiction and nonfiction books, particularly because nonfiction books would be a way to experience new vocabulary and introduce new themes and concepts to students. I also wanted to give students true stories about individuals who were or are a part of the LGBTQIA in ways that they helped change the world or just lived their lives and have become icons for what they did. And for the fiction books that I chose, I wanted to make sure to provide mirrors and diversity for the students that I am teaching. I chose to do the ABCs of queer history first because it introduces a lot of core vocabulary and ideas that will be studied throughout the text set and throughout the year. And I chose the nonfiction books to follow a little bit of a structure where I started with the ABCs of queer history as the introduction for the nonfiction books. So I started with ABCs of queer history to give a general overview or introduction. I then went to Glenn Burke, the game changer, the man who invented the high five, to introduce history, right, into the story. And Glenn Burke was a man, through this book I actually learned that Glenn Burke was a baseball player and who unintentionally created the high five and came out as gay, and there was a lot of backlash through that. So the Glenn Burke book and the book that follows it, Grandad's Pride, focus on individuals who are gay. Then the next books were Pink, Blue, and You, Questions for Kids About Gender Stereotypes. That is the nonfiction book, and I wanted to include that because I wanted students to next be introduced to what gender stereotypes are and why they're not great, or why it's important to not really focus on them as much. And then the book I chose next, which is my other personal favorite, The Dress in the Window, is about a boy who sees this beautiful red dress in the window and he wants it. And he just is like, I love this dress. It's so beautiful. And his mom doesn't even question it. She's so supportive. And I won't spoil it because I think you should go and read it definitely. But so sweet, so heartwarming, and everybody in the book is so supportive of him. And it's really a great example of how you can include a story that just is natural and just shows the student, or the child or the main character just being who they are without question. And I felt that was a fantastic inclusion book to include in a classroom library, or even in a school library. Outside of the text set, this is absolutely a book I will be purchasing myself for my own classroom. And all of them I will, but The Dress in the Window I felt truly was just a really beautiful portrayal of gender stereotypes don't matter. Boys can wear red dresses and they're beautiful too. Or they're handsome, it doesn't matter. The next set of books that I chose were If You're a Kid Like Gavin and Hooray for He, She, They, and They. I intentionally put these books after the Pink, Blue, and You, Questions About Gender Stereotypes, because Gavin is a child who is transgender and had to fight for their right to be who they were and to be accepted for who they were. And I chose If You're a Kid Like Gavin to go along with Hooray for She, He, They, and They, to introduce a character who has had different pronouns, and then to use Hooray for She, He, They, and They to then talk about and introduce and discuss what the different pronouns are. And if this were used in a first or second grade classroom, pronouns are a topic that are discussed. And it's important to not only discuss how to use pronouns in a sentence for grammar, but then to take it and express that pronouns can be used for your identity as well. I thought was a really great way to incorporate into this lesson. Finally, the last two books are Miss Rita, Mystery Reader, and I Love You Because I Love You. And both of these books are fiction, and both of these books are amazing. I Love You Because I Love You is just a really great portrayal of you're allowed to be anything and anyone, and the narrator, who is whoever's reading the book, right? It could be the mom or the dad or the teacher, loves you as the individual just because I love you. And there's no right or wrong way to exist because I just love you. And I thought that was such a powerful way to end this study or this text set, and to really continue to foster really positive parent or student-teacher relationships. Miss Rita, Mystery Reader, on the other hand, is so adorable. It really is such a great book for diversity, focusing a lot on different diversity and intersectionalities being included in books. I felt that this book did this really well. The child in the book identifies as they. They identify as they, and it's very natural. Like everybody in the book calls them that, and that's just their identity. And they have a name, and I don't remember it off the top of my head, but their dad is also a drag queen, and it was their turn. It was the child's turn to have their parent volunteer in the classroom as a mystery reader, and the child came home and told their dad that they wanted Miss Rita to come, and Miss Rita is the dad's drag personality. And so at first they were so excited, and they got to help the dad choose the outfits and get Miss Rita ready, and Miss Rita helped then get the child ready and take care of everything. And then they started to get a little nervous because they kept thinking, like, what if my friends don't love Miss Rita like I do? What if they make fun of me? What if Miss Rita scares them or confuses them? And Miss Rita, I think, ended up having like a little talk with them about it, and they decided, we're just going to do it. And Miss Rita I think Miss Rita's idea was actually to have the child dress up a little bit too. And it ended up just being a really, really magical and really great experience. And all of the kids were so excited to have this experience. And all of the adults that were in the book too seemed like thrilled about it. And I thought that this was just a beautiful book for the times, but also a beautiful book to portray so many concepts that have been discussed, right? Throughout this entire text set, being gay, being a part of the LGBTQIA, being accepted for being who you are, being a little nervous about it, and maybe being scared to express your identity or express identity around you, but then also sharing it and being accepted and knowing that it's okay to be who you are. And I wanted to wrap up this text set with these last two books because I feel like they both had a really powerful story of acceptance and love, and I just thought that was so important. Another thing that was brought up in the research that I did not include in this paper because I didn't find a lot on it, and I didn't want to mash any words when explaining this, so I'm going to explain it very lightly. But something else that I noticed that was really included in a lot of research, in some research, was that there is a struggle in the LGBTQI book community that a lot of the books that are created or that are put out include a individual or child of a differing gender identity, sexual identity, anything, and they're not accepted. And they're bullied, or they're told that they're wrong, or anything is happening, right? And the main conflict of the story is them not being accepted, them being ignored, them being bullied, and them having to figure out a way, or going to elders and having to figure out a way to make or to be accepted, or to make other people accept them. And there was a lot of criticism in the research that I found on that, because they felt that the research was basically saying that they felt that that should not be the only headline or only storyline that students are reading, or that you're going to be bullied and you're going to have to just figure it out. And I completely agreed with that the research that came out, and I was really surprised by it again, because again, it's just not something that I'm very a part of and I didn't know very well, and it was really eye-opening to experience that. So while I was creating my text set, as I was reading the books or going through and like looking for different stories, I intentionally did include one story, the If You're a Kid Like Gavin. I intentionally chose to include that one because I felt that it was important that it is portrayed a little, just so that it's recognized and you can have very productive conversations about why it's not okay to treat other people like this. But I did not want it to be a main theme in the text set, and I did not want it to be something that students saw often. I just wanted them to be gently exposed to it. This is why it's not okay. This is how you treat people. This is how we could help support somebody that's being like this, being treated like this, and then moving on to acceptance and just natural experiences. So that was another really big aspect of how I chose the books in my text set, even though I didn't include it in the research aspect, because I thought it was so important. So moving on to the final little snippet of this video, I have some advice that I would give another teacher or even pre-service teachers, especially because the research showed that pre-service teachers are scared almost, and they're having a hard time coming into the classrooms feeling confident in providing students with these experiences. I would start by saying that as teachers, we need to be very intentional when we're creating classroom libraries or text sets, and to be sure to not only include books of LGBTQIA topics and themes, but we also need to check these books for diversity. We want to make sure that books including transgender students are not only Caucasian, or books that portray students affirming and being accepted are only Caucasian students. We want to see a very diverse cast and crew of everybody in the story being racially diverse and intersectional, and there being different family types. And we want to see students not being the only person who is identifying as something out of the norm. We want the books to be that LGBTQIA individuals are the norm and that it's widely accepted, because that is what we want to nurture in our environments. We also need to remember that children need mirrors, and it's important to include a range of books that can provide these mirrors for students. Again, which is why it's so important to be intentional. We need to provide students with books on LGBTQIA themes and topics that can help build a strong community of love and acceptance within our classrooms and beyond, because the relationships and the lessons that you teach your students, they're going to take with them forever and ever. And we want to make sure that we're building those foundational skills of loving and accepting people no matter who they are. And by also doing that, you're also going to build your teacher-student relationships with them, and they're going to know that they're safe with you. And no matter what's happening in their lives, they can come to you for support. Finally, we have to remember to be brave. We are the gatekeepers that either allow students to have experiences or block them from ever being introduced to them. And it's important to build strong relationships with our students, but we also need to build them with their families. And we need to use the research and the resources that we have to explain to families and to our administration why it's so important that students have these experiences or are introduced to these themes within books. And all I can say is it's going to be hard, and it is. And I recently actually had an experience where a child was interacting with a book that happened to have an LGBTQIA experience in it, and I was not at the school, and it was taken to my administrator, and I got in trouble for it. And it was very disheartening and frustrating, but also the timing is crazy, because I just did this whole research project, and now I have research for why it's actually really great that student was reading that book. So all I can say is it's hard, but we can do this. Thank you so much for taking your time to watch this video, and I really hope that this topic can really help support you in your everyday lives and in your classrooms as well. Have a great day.